Hello friends, my name's the Real Emile and welcome back to some more Forza Top Gear laps. Today we're taking a look at SUVs and a truck, so let's get straight into it with our first vehicle, which is the Mercedes-Benz G65 AMG. 603 horsepower, 5,688 pounds of a weight. This is the most powerful vehicle here today by a little bit. So the G65 AMG. Well, I'm going to be honest, it looks exactly how it drives, essentially. So, first of all, it's big and heavy, and you can feel that. All of the vehicles here today are basically heavy, so I got kind of used to it. There is a huge amount of tyre smoke coming off the G65 there. This doesn't have a differential problem like sort of some of the older vehicles we see go around here. Which is good. I'm not really sure what that smoke was. I think it's just more grip smoke than anything. It didn't have any like diff issue when I was driving it, at least. So the first thing about this car is it is floaty. The suspension on this is soft, so it does rock around quite a bit when you're going through the corners. That's quite scary. I did spin it out a few times because of the floaty suspension, similar to the Escort RS 1600 we had go around. The other thing with this car is it is quick. 603 horsepower is an awful lot, rivaling quite a lot of supercars actually. That's more than a 458 Talia and an SLS AMG, actually, now that I think of it. So yeah, this thing is hugely quick. Not the nicest vehicle to drive in the world, but I definitely recommend it just because of its silliness. Next up we have the BMW X5M, 547 horsepower, 5,368 pounds of weight. This is the second most powerful car here today. Now, the X5M really surprised me because this is actually a really nice vehicle to drive. One of the main differences for me between Forza Motorsport 5 and 6 is in the way they've handled SUVs. Now, before in Forza 5, SUVs were very terrible. Even in Forza 4, I would usually recommend to stay away from them because they were very, very understeery. And they were also very heavy and quite wallowy. In this game, they are totally different. They're actually really drivable, and the X5M is the crown jewel of all of these. Honestly, this drives like a sports car. The only thing that reminds you that this is an SUV is the tall riding position. 5,368 pounds of weight is a lot. However, this being a four-wheel drive vehicle, you don't really feel it all that much. And you definitely don't feel it in the steering. There's no understeer in this vehicle, or if there is, it's a very negligible amount. To be honest with you, this vehicle drives very much like a Mitsubishi Evo, and I know that sounds completely strange for a 547 horsepower huge behemoth of an off-roader, but it really does drive very, very nicely. I'd recommend giving the X5M a go because it certainly surprised me. Speaking of giving things a go, this is the Jeep Grand Cherokee SRT, 470 horsepower, 5,150 pounds of weight. This, again, drives very similar to the X5M. The handling is slightly worse, I would say, on this. The suspension is a little bit more wallowy, but other than that, this is another great vehicle to drive. Essentially, it just drives like the X5M, just with slightly less power, which means it is a little less quick than the X5M. However, I do believe this vehicle is quite a bit cheaper than the X5M, so ultimately it just comes down to how much you're willing to spend on these vehicles. But yeah, this is great. Once again, it drives like a Mitsubishi Evo, essentially. It just drives like a four-wheel drive sports saloon would. 5,150 pounds. It's a lot of weight. Again, you don't feel it because it's four-wheel drive. Yeah, the SRT really is fantastic, and I hope they go ahead with that Hellcat version they're on about making. In fact, I wish they'd bring that into Forza 6. I very much doubt they will, but if they ever did, then I would very much like to throw that around the Top Gear track and see what sort of lap times we could pull with that. But yeah, the SRT Cherokee Jeep, another one I do recommend. Ultimately, it's very much the same as the X5M, so again, try them both out yourselves and see which one you guys end up preferring, but honestly, give both of these vehicles a go. They will surprise you very much. Next up, we've got the Ford F-150 Raptor. This is the 2017 model, 450 horsepower, 5,700 pounds of weight. We've had the old Raptor around before, the 2011 model, and that did okay for a heavy pickup truck. This I was expecting to perhaps be a little bit better. It has got a little bit more power, And on top of that, it also has a interesting gearbox. The F-150 Raptor 2017 model actually has 10 gears, which is an awful lot. It's way more than it actually needs. But it does mean that the gear ratios themselves are actually very short, which is one of the issues you could sometimes find with these trucks, and indeed we'll see that later on, is that they have long gear ratios. This doesn't. I believe for the most part on this track I was just constantly changing gear. I think the highest gear I actually went for is 6th. I'm not sure if you actually would ever need the 10th gear as far as to get up to its top speed or whatever. But there you go. Other than that, pretty decent. It has very reactive steering. Now, we've encountered this before on the Honda Civic 2007. I can't remember if there's any other vehicles which I've had encountered this. There is actually vehicles that I have encountered this on, but I don't remember them off by my head. And yeah, there's very reactive steering. It's very weird to get used to, however, it is ultimately a good thing. That means you point this thing at a corner, you turn the wheel, it will go into it. Yeah, the F-150 Raptor is a pretty decent vehicle despite its huge behemoth of size. Next up we've got the GMC Syclone, 280 horsepower, 3,613 pounds of weight. The least powerful car here today, but also the lightest. Essentially it's the Lotus of the pickup truck world. Now the reason I wanted to throw the GMC Syclone around is because this vehicle is actually extremely interesting. It has 4-wheel drive and it has a turbocharged V6, I believe. And back in the day, this thing was hugely quick. It's actually a very, very quick car from 0 to 60. So how does the GMC drive? Well, it has long gear ratios. As we just discussed with the F-150 Raptor, one issue with trucks usually is the long gear ratios their gearbox has, and this has long gear ratios. It also understeers quite a bit. This is one of those Forza Motorsport 5 bringovers, so I'm assuming it's got handling very similar to the Forza 5 model. I do remember in Forza 5 this car did actually have some understeer, and it's definitely brought that back into Forza 6. However, it's not undrivable, it's relatively decent. Getting this thing off the line isn't actually too bad compared to most turbocharged vehicles, because we usually have issues when it comes to turbocharged vehicles, but this one, no real issues getting off the line. Just sort of boot it when it clicks down to 1 and you're basically done. Yeah, understeer was the prevailing thing of this vehicle, but it's still a good fun vehicle to throw around, and I definitely think it'd be good in a drag race. Next up we've got the Ram Runner, 390 horsepower, 5,949 pounds of weight. This is the heaviest vehicle here today. It's also the second least powerful, which means it's the slowest vehicle here today. As you saw, getting off the line is an absolute bitch, and it's not because this thing's got a turbocharger. It's because this thing has stupidly long gears. The long gears in this are just, it's stupid long. Another issue is the suspension is soft because it's one of those sort of raid trucks, kind of. So yeah, it has very, very soft, wallowy suspension. And also, surprisingly, it has very little grip. This is how you'd usually expect the pickup trucks to drive. This is how they drove in previous Forza games. They just did not feel like they had much grip at all. Yeah, the Ram was probably my least favourite vehicle of the day to drive. Didn't really have too much fun in this one, but it's still a fantastic sight to see this thing going around the Top Gear track. Yeah, the long gear ratios made it a hell through like acceleration. It wasn't very quick. It hasn't got enough power. And that sounds really strange because it's got 390 horsepower, which on a normal day would be a decent amount, but it just hasn't got enough. This thing could deal with at least 100 more horsepower. With 100 more horsepower, I think it could be relatively competitive, but as it stands, it's just very slow. Next up, we've got the Local Motors Rally Fighter, 430 horsepower, 3,800 pounds of weight. Second lightest vehicle here today. Now the Rally Fighter, well, it has long gears again. This actually drives kind of similar to the Ram. This drives like the Ram if the Ram had any form of power in it, essentially. It's got the long gear ratios, it's got soft suspension, again, because it's sort of like a raidy off-road vehicle. It's also got this kind of little grip. This is rear-wheel drive, if I do remember, which is actually something quite surprising. You never expect that from the Rally Fighter. One of the issues with being rear-wheel drive is you actually do feel that weight. You also do feel the weight in the Ram Runner, it has to be said. I know I've been saying, you know, four-wheel drive you don't really feel the weight, but in the Ram Runner and in this, you do feel the weight. Yeah, the Rally Fighter wasn't really as much fun as I thought it would be to throw around here. Again, it's still one of those amazing spectacles to see this thing just charging around the Top Gear track. And I do love its craziness, but yeah, the Rally Fighter in stock form isn't the greatest, it has to be said. At least not for my driving style. I don't know, maybe you could find some use for this, but I think it's more at home in Horizon than it is here in a motorsport game. However, I am very happy to see it here because it's extremely stupid. On to the times, and the quickest vehicle of the day was the X5M going into 102nd. That's stupidly quick. That's faster than an R33 Skyline, a 2015 WRX Impreza. It's quicker than basically all of the Evos that have been around here. That is stupidly fast. The Jeep Cherokee goes into 110th with a 126.316, beating out a Golf R, faster than most hot hatches, which is pretty good. G65 goes into 113th, beating out a Plymouth Prowler and a Mitsubishi GTO with a time of 126.908. Pretty decent from the Jeep and the G-Class. The Rally Fighter goes into 122nd, which is pretty good, beats out a RS Mark 1 Focus, which is quite surprising, and a Clio V6, which is, yeah, very interesting actually. The GMC Syclone goes into 169th with a 129.318, beating out a 2016 MX-5, a Ford Fiesta ST, EK9 Civic. Yeah, that's actually quite surprising, and a Nismo Duke RS, which I'm very happy to see it beat that. The Ford F-150 Raptor 2017 goes into 147th with a 132.802, beats out an Alfa Romeo Milano, a GTI VR6, Clio Williams, pretty decent time really, quicker than the old vehicle. And finally today, the Ram Runner goes into 155th with a 137.963, does beat out a Lamborghini LM002, but ultimately that vehicle just really felt like it needed more power. So anyways friends, I want to thank you all very much for watching this episode of the Forza Top Gear Lap series. There is a DLC coming out later today, so I will be checking that out, so to make sure to stay locked to the channel after about 6 PM, and hopefully I should have the video up for that. Anyways, as always, feel free to suggest themes you'd like to see for next week. And yeah, thank you all very much for watching. My name's been The Real Emile, and until next time, farewell.